Chapter 16. My name is Tuberculosis Rabbit, you can call me Tu, or you can call me Tuer. Yi, what are you thinking about? Seeing Chen Yi furrow his brows, Tuberculosis Rabbit asked out of curiosity, is it that troublesome? Yet. After pondering for a while, Chen Yi finally spoke, this 520 limited time gift package for 88 points is currently the only way to get props, and it even comes with 5 skill fragments. It could be said to be a very cost-effective package. We also have nearly 10,000 points on hand. If we were to broadly buy up other people's purchase rights, subtracting the handling fees, we could still get about 100 packages for free. Then what's the hesitation for? Tuberculosis Rabbit's eyes sparkled with excitement, such a good deal, go ahead and buy it. That's exactly where the problem is. Chen Yi shook his head, sighed in resignation, and continued, haven't you noticed that all the things that have happened so far are too similar to those in a domestic web game? Whether it's this title with a special effect that you simply can't turn off, or the familiar feeling of a 520 limited time event, or even the exaggerated damage numbers above the boss's head. They all look exactly like a domestic web game. And there's a particularly bad thing about domestic web games, right before they release a very special offer, game planners will often come up with an event that is better than the usual offers. They use this event to deplete all the points players have saved up. Then, when the special offer comes around, if the players want the event rewards, their only option is to top up again. That's true. Tuberculosis Rabbit nodded in agreement, but it never tricked me. When I used to play games, I was like the Pixiu, always hoarding stuff in my backpack, never spending or using anything. According to your guess, Yi, is there going to be a more favorable event with the June 1st update, and our current move should be to save up points? Yet. Chen Yi brushed the dust off his clothes and then added, that's what I'm thinking, but it's really hard to let go of this event, let's just buy 10. Go for a 10 draw. And the remaining points will definitely not be spent, we'll save them all for the June 1st update. Oh. Tuberculosis Rabbit tucked the claw knife into his chest and muttered as he got up and followed behind Yi, this conversation sounds eerily familiar. What did you say? Nothing, nothing. Let's go, Yi. Walking on the street from the basement, Chen Yi looked at the noisy crowd on the street and stood there without saying a word, expressionless. The situation outside was pretty much as he had expected. After Cupid died, his body turned into white light and disappeared, leaving no corpse behind. I heard that some props were dropped. They were taken by the officials. During the entire boss raid, only a very few people were injured. Medical staff came and applied simple dressings before leaving, as there weren't enough hospital beds. But several hearses from the crematorium did show up. If anyone was even slightly touched by Cupid's bowstring, there was no such concept as injured for them, they could just be buried on the spot. At this moment, those who had just fought in the battle were trembling uncontrollably in their legs, yet their faces were flush with excitement and pride as they loudly shared the process of the fight with those around them, enjoying the worshipful gazes from the people. No one knew for sure what drove these folks to rush into battle fearlessly against the boss. But from the violent trembling of their legs, it was clear that their adrenaline was still surging, and they were probably feeling some aftershock. The entire street was bustling. Many who had hidden in their houses came out to find out what had happened. Of course, it was originally very lively. But when Chen Yi came out, everything completely changed. The street suddenly quieted down in a few seconds, and then everyone's gaze turned uniformly towards Chen Yi, or more precisely, towards the title above Chen Yi's head. Blue and glowing words in the night. Like a firefly with a face full of stubble, it was startlingly conspicuous. Everyone on the street slowly opened their mouths, looking at Chen Yi with expressions of shock. What is this? Clutching a dagger, Han Yu, who was surrounded by his family, looked enviously at the title above Chen Yi's head, silently clenched his fist, and whispered, one day, I will get that title too. Han Yu was the one who had ranked second in the recent damage rankings. The dagger in his hand possessed the ability to inflict limitless bleeding damage. Don't talk nonsense. A quite charming middle-aged woman standing behind Han Yu tapped his head with a hint of anxiety, I just want you safe, from now on, don't do such risky things. Mom. Han Yu, somewhat dissatisfied, pushed the woman's hand away and retorted while standing tall, ever heard the saying? Those who don't dare to sit at the gambling table will never lose, but also will never win. The world's structure is clearly about to change, starting from today, I have to take a seat at the gambling table for this family. I want to keep winning. And didn't I just win? I got the second spot on the leaderboard and received a lot of rewards. It's just. He looked enviously at Chen Yi, it's just that I didn't land the final blow and didn't get that title, that's all. You child. The woman, with a slightly anxious expression, said, no one can keep winning forever, your father is just. All right. The man behind her, with a calm expression, interrupted her saying, placing his hand on Han Yu's shoulder, you're quite right, the structure of the world is about to change. From today on, your dad and you will sit at the gambling table together. Never mind your mom, what would a woman understand? We still don't know how things will turn out later. If we don't become stronger now, we might face unthinkable hardships later. You guys. The woman was slightly angry but didn't want to show it in front of her child, so she just turned her head away to show her displeasure. She wasn't oblivious to these things. She just didn't want her family to die, after all, several people had just died. Chen Yi let out a soft sigh, didn't say much, and started to direct the Tuberculosis Rabbit to find people willing to sell their time-limited gift pack rights. It must be said. The Tuberculosis Rabbit might not be a good salesman, but it was definitely a good, annoying salesman. You could see the Tuberculosis Rabbit bursting into the midst of several people with a face filled with excitement, and words shot out of its mouth like rapid fire. Let's start with a simple introduction. My name is Tuberculosis Rabbit, you can call me Tu, or you can call me Tuer. Have you bought that time-limited gift pack for 88 points? If you haven't, could you transfer the gift pack rights to us? As a reward, I'll give you some compensation, how about 3 points? Too low? Then how about 5 points? Chapter 17. How much has your claw knife's charge progressed? For the Tuberculosis Rabbit, this was a great way to make a living. It didn't matter even if it didn't acquire the qualification. After all, it still increased the charge progress of its claw knife. How could there be such a good way to make a living? Half an hour later, Chen Yi, with 10 gift packages bought for 88 points each, returned to his rented room. The night had deepened. Yet the outside was anything but quiet. Clearly, this sudden limited time event had struck a chord with many people. But there was also a bright side, at least for tonight, with so many activities going on, you could barely see anyone violating the May rules and dying on the spot. Under such circumstances, it was also difficult to remember the presence of ghosts. The 10 draw began. Subsequently, 50 skill fragments quietly lay in his backpack, along with 10 props. Just spending 980 points in exchange for 10 props was definitely a relatively cost-effective deal. If they didn't look at the prop information, that is. Prop name, Absolute Itch Relieving Ear Picking Spoon. Prop level, E tier. Prop effect, this ear picking spoon can automatically relieve any itching in your ear canal. Prop limitation, it only has an itch relieving effect when inserted into the ear canal. Skill introduction, do you often have itchy ears? This prop will help you a lot. Outrageous, isn't it? No, there's more outrageous stuff. Prop name, Automatic Coffee Machine. Prop level, E tier. Prop effect, this is a coffee machine, you just pour coffee into it, and hot coffee appears. Prop limitation, only coffee can be poured into it. Skill introduction, now you can have hot coffee anytime, anywhere. Yes. These 10 props were all the kind of props that are not entirely useless but are somewhat useful daily life props. All were E-tier props. You might say they weren't worth much, getting such a prop for 88 points wasn't a loss. But to say they were valuable. Compared to the B-tier and C-tier props that the two of them pulled from the gift packages, the disparity was just too great. Curiously, the Tuberculosis Rabbit spoke up, if this prop is combined with the A cup of coffee skill, wouldn't you be able to have hot coffee forever? Chen Yi, weary, tossed the props to the Tuberculosis Rabbit, quickly washed up, and then lay down on the bed and closed his eyes. I'm going to sleep first. It's been a tiring day, we'll talk about anything else tomorrow. Oh, okay. The Tuberculosis Rabbit, with a joyful grin, carefully arranged these props in his own spatial backpack. He loved collecting these kinds of useful, yet not really useful, trinkets. After also washing up, he lay down on the other bed next to Chen Yi, ready to drift off to sleep. An hour later, Chen Yi, lying flat on the bed, opened his eyes expressionlessly and looked up at the ceiling. How could he have forgotten this point? How could he sleep in the same room with the tuberculosis rabbit? The tuberculosis rabbit and he rented separate rooms in the same complex, and they usually slept in their own rooms. Today, because he was too sleepy, he had forgotten this point. The tuberculosis rabbit's incessant talking was actually bearable during the day, the most terrifying part was at night. Is that so? You're also born in the year of the rabbit? What a coincidence! Hee, I'm born in the year of the rabbit too. Me? I'm called the tuberculosis rabbit. People say I talk too much, which is why I got this nickname. But I don't think I'm a chatterbox at all. What, you're asking me why I don't work in customer service? I did work in customer service, but because I kept sending messages to customers, they got annoyed by the constant pop-up notifications and complained. After that, I was let go. Indeed. The scariest thing about tuberculosis rabbit is his habit of talking in his sleep. And it's the kind that doesn't stop all night long. As for the April rule requiring everyone to talk with others for 1,000 sentences, it was practically non-existent to tuberculosis rabbit. Every time tuberculosis rabbit was in a dream, he would complete this rule task. Though it is unclear why the system counts tuberculosis rabbit's sleep talking as having conversations with people. Perhaps it's because he talks to people in his dreams. That's also why, when tuberculosis rabbit came over to pick him up this afternoon, Chen Yi said without surprise that tuberculosis rabbit's daily rule task was probably automatically completed the moment he woke up from sleep in the morning. Pretty good. Chen Yi silently took out earplugs from his pocket, inserted them into his ears, closed his eyes, and began to try to force himself to sleep. Soon, several hours passed. It was daylight. Yawn. As tuberculosis rabbit slowly woke up from his sleep and stretched comfortably, he then saw Chen Yi, who was already dressed and calmly smoking in a chair, and said with some surprise. Yi, you woke up this early. Chen Yi paused for a moment, calmly flicked the ash from his cigarette into an ashtray nearby. How much progress does your claw knife have on its charge? Why are you suddenly asking about that? Tuberculosis rabbit, puzzled, took out his claw knife and the next second exclaimed excitedly, Yi, the charge progress on my claw knife has reached 328. Surprised? Chen Yi, with two dark circles under his eyes, looked at tuberculosis rabbit somberly. You forgot about your sleep talking problem, didn't you? Hee. Tuberculosis rabbit, somewhat embarrassed, scratched the back of his head. I kind of forgot, so you didn't sleep well last night, did you? What do you think? How about I treat you to some mutton soup? Let's go. Chen Yi didn't linger, he directly grabbed the jacket on the chair and prepared to head out the door. He was hungry, and it was time to find a restaurant to eat. Both of them knew how to cook. But the food they made was beyond description. So every day they had to find restaurants that were open at such an hour, places that took money but not lives, and have a hearty meal. Congratulations, young master, you've won again. Uncle Wei looked at the young master standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window and spoke admiringly in his heart. The tradability of points has been proven by yesterday's limited-time event. Before this event, we had already collected a substantial amount of points. Last night alone, we collected a total of 892 520 limited-time gift packs. We've opened a lot of props as a result. Among them, there are 6 B grade props, 78 C grade props, and even more below D grade. Our people are still continuing to buy. Gao Yiming, wearing a coat with his hands in his pockets, stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, looking at the rising Chaoyang and smiled contentedly. This is the charm of capital. What is the charm of capital? It's that when some people can't even afford a single gift pack, we can buy nearly 1,000 of them. They think that with the advent of this game, they've had a chance to turn their lives around. How naive! Chapter 18. Brother, do you want to try collecting payments with points? Truly a miraculous unknown power. Gao Yiming stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window, staring at the red wine glass in his hand with a sentimental expression, and murmured, it won't be long before the old powers will face a real upheaval. Whoever has more props and skill fragments will have more say in this new world. The wine glass in his hand was an item that had come out from the 520 limited-time gift pack AB tier prop. Its effect was extremely powerful. Prop name, the Gentleman's Red Wine Glass. Prop level, B tier. Prop effect, when activated, the rim can spout out a large amount of blood, enough to fill a small warehouse. Prop restrictions: before each use, one must treat the wine glass to a bottle of good red wine. Skill introduction: if you're a vampire, then this prop would be the treasure of your dreams. A rather good prop. If one used this prop to kill someone, it could drown a person to death in anything but a very large room, and the Law Enforcement Bureau would be completely unable to detect any traces. But this prop, coupled with another one, becomes interesting. Another prop from the 520 limited time gift pack. Prop name: holographic projection. Prop level: C tier. Prop effect: when activated, a holographic projection of a night parade of 100 demons will appear within 100 square feet, lasting 30 seconds. Prop restrictions: using it once will consume 200 points. Prop introduction: specially developed by the Ghost Realm Wedding Company, so you can have enough flair at your wedding in the Ghost Realm. Gao Yiming slowly placed the two props on the table and turned his head to look at the elder standing behind him. Take them. For every 10 people who die by violating the Mei rules, there's a certain probability of triggering that random event. You see the title above Chen Yi's head. An ordinary person who managed to get the highest kill damage in the Cupid event, and also land the final blow, is that luck? No. He shook his head slightly. Rather than luck, I believe that he got a powerful prop from that treasure box, like that sniper rifle. Go to the village. These days, the disappearance of several villages can't make any waves at all. Understood, young master. Uncle Wei's wrinkled face showed no emotion as he nodded, lowered his eyelids, and picked up the two props from the table, ready to leave. Wait a minute. Gao Yiming suddenly interrupted. Don't forget, a random event can be triggered if 10 people break the Mei rules at the same location. Don't kill too many at once. To avoid waste. Kill them 10 by 10. Don't worry, young master. Just as Uncle Wei was preparing to leave, he suddenly stopped, turned his head back to Gao Yiming. Young master, we've lost contact with Captain Li, and I reckon he's fallen prey to Chen Yi or got imprisoned somewhere. If Captain Li were not in trouble, he would surely contact us. Should we send someone after Chen Yi? Chen Yi, hey. Gao Yiming sat down in the chair, leaned back against the chair back, and slowly closed his eyes, tiredly saying, the world has truly changed, hasn't it? Just because an utterly ordinary person gains some power in a game, he dares to kill people. And not just any people but officers. Truly not to be underestimated. No need to look for him now, other companies are also laying out their strategies, and not many people know the rules for triggering random events yet. We can gain an early advantage. What we need to do now is to acquire more props and skill fragments as soon as possible. As for Chen Yi, let's hold off for now. If he knows what's good for him, there's no need to bother with him for the time being. Investigate this person for me, and send me the information. Understood. The rule for Mei is calm and cool. Every player cannot think of ghosts in their minds, or they'll die instantly if they do so for over 3 seconds. When the number of people who die at a certain location due to violating the Mei rule reaches more than 10 at once, there is a certain probability that a reincarnation event will be triggered. And you can open a reincarnation treasure box. The 1W points that Chen Yi had, were from a reincarnation treasure box he had opened. And these two props, if you want to make someone think of ghosts, it's just too easy. Whew! The tuberculosis rabbit looked satisfied as it put a piece of flatbread into its mouth, followed by a chopstick full of spicy shredded potatoes with slices of lamb, chewing vigorously. As it gulped, the tuberculosis rabbit contentedly pulled out a napkin to wipe the grease from around its mouth and patted its stomach. I'm full. Nothing beats the taste of this stuff. Meanwhile, Chen Yi sat on the side, lifting his bowl to drink the last sip of the lamb soup, oblivious to the strange and envious stares of the passers-by. He had grown accustomed to them. If he couldn't change it, he could only get used to it. After all, no one would willingly have a title above their head that glowed blue in reality. He had even checked the title system in his panel. From lowest to highest, they are white, green, blue, yellow, purple, red, black, rainbow. A total of 8 levels. The rank of the title varies according to the rarity of the title and the difficulty of obtaining it. And his deadly title was of the blue rank. The glow that came with the title was also blue. The most important thing was that he saw something else in the title rules. There is no limit to the number of titles you can wear. That means, if you wish, you could even wear 99 titles. Thinking about this, Chen Yi couldn't help but feel somewhat lost as he leaned back in his chair, looking up at the sky above. With 99 titles on his head, each emitting different colored lights, blue, green, rainbow, what kind of picture would that be? Is this reality even normal? If these things are happening in the real world, isn't that a bit too incongruent? And at that moment, Chen Yi's phone suddenly rang. After picking it up and talking for a while, he put the phone back in his pocket, stood up, and walked over to the motorcycle parked on the side of the street. Let's go, there's a new job. Oh, all right. The tuberculosis rabbit quickly got up to pay for the meal, and just as it was about to leave, it suddenly saw the owner's daughter helping behind him, probably just graduated from high school. After a moment of hesitation, it still turned to the owner and said, "Brother, why don't you try taking points for payment? Anyone who comes for your lamb soup would have to pay with points. Cash, it probably won't be of much use in the future. Points." The owner was stunned for a moment, then gave a subconscious smile. "We don't plan on fighting, these things are for you guys, we just earn some money to get by. Someone just came to buy my points, I sold them all. I know that stuff is useful, can buy gift packs, can draw powerful weapons. But to put it bluntly, we don't plan on killing people, never thought about killing, why do we need that stuff, right?" Chapter 19. Prop name the cat with its tail held high. "But I have to say, little brother, you're a good person too." The boss seemed quite emotional as he wiped his hands on his apron. Those who came to collect points always said that these things were useless and not worth a penny. Those people really think I'm a fool, but I'm just old, not senile. It's just that our aspirations are different. We're just ordinary folks who want to live our days in peace. All right, little brother, I won't chat any longer, I've got more customers to attend to. I'll get busy now. Next time you come to eat, I'll add some extra slices of meat for you." Tuberculosis Rabbit looked at the boss's retreating figure, hesitated as if he wanted to say something, but still quickly pulled out a cigarette from his chest and hurried toward Yi. "I'm here, Yi. Wait for me. This time, we must call on you." At the entrance of Zhongdeng Mall, a uniformed enforcement officer spoke wearily, "Besides you, no one dares to take this job." "Chen Yi, right. We've investigated your records. In your medical history, you have absolutely no emotion of fear. In the whole of Yancheng, you're the only one with this illness. This means that you can completely ignore the calm and cool rule of Mei. There is currently a group of people in Yancheng who have begun to deliberately spread some horror films, and today, quite a few people have died. As you know, these past few days have been the 520 limited time event, where the Cupid monster will randomly appear in the city. The Law Enforcement Bureau's manpower is spread thin, putting out fires everywhere, simply overwhelmed. In the movie theater on the 5th floor, nearly hundreds of people have died in every screening room. Someone. At this point, the enforcement officer suddenly raised his voice in anger. Someone has gone mad and kidnapped a bunch of people, forced them into the theaters, and then played horror films on the big screen. We checked the security footage, but the recordings for this area were all lost today, and there isn't a single eyewitness. We're currently searching vigorously for this group of people. But the most important thing now is to clean up all the corpses in the theaters. Otherwise, if all those bodies rot, the consequences will be unimaginable." Chen Yi furrowed his brow, paused for a while, and then said, "You mentioned that someone deliberately kidnapped people, then forced them to watch horror films." For some reason, he thought of someone. The so-called CEO of the Rising Group. This person had sent Captain Li to catch him, just to find out what reward he had gotten from the chest. And obviously, the other party was also aware of the prerequisite for triggering that special event. He pondered for a while before nodding his head. "All right, I understand. But the skill fragments next to those bodies must have been picked up by now, right? How will the payment be?" "A flat rate of 3,000 points. Deal." Chen Yi, carrying his package, led Tuberculosis Rabbit to the entrance of the cinema. The lights inside were all on, the environment wasn't dark at all. Yet just standing at the entrance of the movie theater, one could see blood flowing out from 7 or 8 theaters visible in front, like rivers, slowly streaming. The stench of blood was extremely pungent as it invaded one's nostrils. "Goodness!" Tuberculosis Rabbit muttered in shock, "How many people died, Yi? These people must have been doing it to trigger that special event, right? In the past, I feel even wiping out their 9 clans wouldn't have been too much. Chen Yi frowned, pulled out a stack of body bags from his package, and took out a set of isolation gear to start putting on. I can go in by myself this time. You just wait outside, it's different from before, you probably can't handle it. Wait outside. The tuberculosis rabbit was stunned for a moment, and subconsciously swept his gaze around the empty 5th floor and the blood-filled movie, suddenly feeling a chill breeze from somewhere, causing his body to shiver instantly. Forget it, Yi, I feel like I'm more likely to get into trouble if I'm out here alone. Following behind you, Yi, I'd feel a bit safer, as long as we don't get separated. Chen Yi glanced at the tuberculosis rabbit and said nothing, just took out another isolation suit from his bag and threw it over, put it on, and take out that prop you've been daydreaming about too. Right. The tuberculosis rabbit's eyes lit up, hastily pulling out a prop from his bosom. This prop was one they had drawn from the 520 limited time gift pack yesterday. It fell under the category of life props. Initially thought to be of little use, it turned out to be quite handy at this moment. Prop name, cat with tail in the air. Prop level, E grade. Prop effect, it allows your mind to be filled with lewd thoughts for 3 hours straight, while maintaining an aroused state constantly. Prop restrictions, after each use, you will enter a 3-day period of weakness. Prop description, do you know why it's E grade? Because after using this prop, your body will emit a scent that a female cat gives off when seeking a mate, which might attract some male cats. This prop, to tell the truth, was rather useless. At least for the two of them it was. But using it here was different. It could keep his mind filled with the thought of mating, so he wouldn't think of ghosts. However, if he could find the right customer, it might actually sell for a good price. Did you find anything? Gao Yiming leaned on the desk with a somewhat gloomy expression, talking to Uncle Wei on the phone. No. Uncle Wei's hoarse voice came through the phone quickly, didn't find anything, but it's likely not the work of the former hooligans in Yanshanj, they've had no moves last night or today. But to do such a thing, it must be no minor force. Still investigating. Gao Yiming looked displeased, the veins on the back of his hand stood out slightly as he flattened a silicone toy on the desk. Idiots, they're complete idiots. Although Yanshanj is chaotic now, the system of the Law Enforcement Bureau and the military is still fundamentally intact. Under such circumstances, to commit such an act so openly is simply seeking death. He wasn't feeling sorry for the people at the cinema, but these people acting so reckless could easily drag him down with them. Why else would he send Uncle Wei to the village? Complete idiots. Then he forcibly suppressed the anger in his heart, trying to calm his tone. How's the progress on your end? Not very good. The voice on the other end of the phone hesitated for a moment before continuing. The person who opens the treasure chest must maintain absolute fearlessness in their heart to unlock rewards, or there's a certain chance of drawing out a nightmare, resulting in instant death. We've tried to open 4 treasure chests so far, only one has been opened successfully, the rest exploded. However, the file on Chen Yi you asked me to look into today, I've got it. This person is naturally void of fear. That is to say, as long as we let him open the treasure chests, not only can we be 100% certain of opening the chests, but the rewards may also be exceptional. Chapter 20. Today is already May 20th, and there's not much time left until the end of the month. Born without the emotion of fear. Gao Yiming's eyes narrowed slightly as he leaned against the desk, tilting his head to look out the window without speaking. Under the rules of May, players were not to form any images or pictures of ghosts in their minds, lest they die violently after just 3 seconds. Of course, merely thinking the word ghost wouldn't pose any problem. Throughout the month, the globe used various methods to deal with this situation, including the unrestricted amplification of human desires to keep the mind in a state of constant arousal, with no time to think of anything else. The foremost of the 3 poisons, lust. At this moment, it had become a life-saving medicine. Beyond that, there were a series of measures like state-organized open-air disco parties. Apart from an increased number of deaths a few days ago, the situation has gradually come under control, with massive fatal incidents largely avoided. Despite the information blackout. But to his knowledge, there are already 14 cities around the world that have become ghost towns, empty of people. When a city is filled with chunks of mangled corpses, when half-bodies can sometimes be seen high atop buildings, and when the sewers overflow with blood. Even if there are many survivors left in the city. Come the dead of night. nerves stretched to breaking. It might only take a gust of wind to be the last straw that breaks the camel's back. There are already 14 empty ghost towns. Of course, that term might not be accurate, as some children with no concrete concept of ghosts and some people with mental illnesses may still be clinging to life in some corner. But how long they can survive is anyone's guess. Those who reacted quickly did well to begin with, and the current order is still somewhat preserved, but many places are said to have already descended into chaos, each fending for themselves in a state of panic. Being without fear meant that even if one thought of the image of a ghost, one could quickly purge it from the mind. Essentially, one could be completely immune to the rules of May. If Chen Yi were to open the chests, he could guarantee the opening of every chest and that the rewards would be critical hits. His eyes, faintly tinged with red, licked the corner of his mouth and brought the phone to his ear, whispering, "Bring the person back." Understood. It's true that some basic order can still be maintained for now, but what about after the third version update? The fourth? The inevitable outcome will be the collapse of order. When that time comes, on the ruins, a new set of rulers will rise. And these rulers will be those like him, who started planning early. At the cinema, Chen Yi and Tuberculosis Rabbit were stuffing the body fragments in the theater into body bags, piece by piece, then tying the bags and throwing them down from the 5th floor. Down in the lobby, someone was waiting to load these body bags into a vehicle and haul them away. Yi. Tuberculosis Rabbit took a breath, wiping the sweat from his forehead, and casually said, "Today is May 20th, it won't be long before the end of the month. We're about to face the version update on June 1 st. Who knows what the rules for the month will be after the June 1st update? It happens to be Children's Day on June 1st, too." Chen Yi casually tied up a body bag, stood up to stretch and limber up before replying. The April version update said a thrilling themed rule would be added in May. So May added a calm and cool. In the May update, it said they would add a life-themed rule in June. So the rule for June should be related to life, like, one must eat 1,000 kilograms of rice every day. Tuberculosis Rabbit said somewhat speechlessly, "If that's really the rule, I think it would be easier to just kill all the humans in the world. It's like not leaving any chance for survival at all." "That's not known." Chen Yi shook his head, "I'm not exactly sure what the rule would be, but it will definitely be about life, and it should be rather gentle. There won't be cases of dying for violating the rules. But April's rules will be going offline by the end of May. Finally, no need to converse with people for 1,000 sentences every day, that rule is seriously lethal." "Oh." Tuberculosis Rabbit, seemingly not yet satisfied, smacked his lips and said, "I didn't feel the presence of April's rules at all. If it were 10,000 sentences, then it might have been somewhat challenging." Just as Chen Yi was about to say something with a displeased look, he suddenly frowned, remembering something. "Wait, did you just say that June 1st is Children's Day? If we base it on the limited time event on May 20th, then it's very likely that a special, limited time event will happen on June 1st, Children's Day." "You don't say." Tuberculosis Rabbit spoke with some hesitation. After all, there were no limited time events for April Fool's Day on April 1st and Labor Day on May 1st, right? It's being perfected. Chen Yi took a deep breath and suddenly felt as if he had come to a realization. This global game that has enveloped the entire world is slowly being perfected. From the initial rules of April, to points and skill fragments appearing in May, to the limited time event gifts, titles, and props of May 20. It's apparent that this game is gradually becoming more comprehensive. The absence of limited time events in the past is very likely because the Snow Sea project team hadn't developed that aspect yet. If my guess is correct, then Children's Day on June 1st will definitely have a limited time event, and it will also be based on the monthly theme of life rules. He stopped talking and just stood there, frowning deeply in thought. What rule could be related to both life and Children's Day? But after a moment, he put the thought aside. There was too little information, and it wasn't something that could be forcibly figured out this way. By now, the corpses inside the cinema hall had been almost completely cleaned up. Not a single skill fragment. All had been picked up by the perpetrators. The bodies were fine, but cleaning up the blood was a bit troublesome, there was simply too much of it. 4 hours later, Chen Yi stood in the almost completely clean cinema hall, breathing slightly wearily. The job had indeed been quite demanding. If not for the passive skill Calm and Composed, he would have probably collapsed by now. The skill effect of Calm and Composed allowed him to double his physical attributes as long as he was completely fearless inside. Just as they were preparing to leave, A familiar notification sound suddenly rang in everyone's ears. Online patch update notice. Effective immediately, all firearms with kinetic energy exceeding 1.8 joules per square centimeter are unusable. Gone. The patch notice was just that simple sentence. Chapter 21. It's hard to know how powerful the claw knife will be with a charge level of only 389. The concept of kinetic energy greater than 1.8 joules per square centimeter might be unclear to many. Let's give an example, shall we? A person with gastroenteritis, who'd held in gas all day, finally couldn't hold it in any longer and let out a loud fart. In the moment of farting, imagine lighting a lighter placed behind the butt. The force unleashed in that moment would be greater than 1.8 joules per square centimeter. That is to say, the instant this rule came into effect, all the firearms in the world turned into paper tigers, completely useless. Chen Yi's brow furrowed as he quickly pulled out his own sniper rifle from his embrace. Only after confirming it could still be used did he breathe a slight sigh of relief. It seemed that this restriction only applied to the existing firearms on the planet. Props that were firearms were not affected at all. His sniper rifle could transform into a Christmas candy cane, which, once transformed, had the ability to see through objects. The reason he wasn't using it as a cane here was simply because the place was too dirty, and he didn't want to soil his only reliable treasure. All firearms have become useless. The tuberculosis rabbit first froze, then couldn't help but swallow silently, turning to look at the sniper rifle in Chen Yi's hand and muttered, "Doesn't that mean this sniper rifle in our hands is the only firearm in the world that can still be used? Even if it's not the only one, it should be one of the few." Chen Yi shook his head. But what can be certain is that in the future, weapon props that are firearms, due to their range advantage, should be stronger than props of the same level. And once all firearms around the world become ineffective, it will be hard to maintain order. The former military, without firearms, will just be ordinary people with better physical fitness and discipline. I think I understand the intent of the Snow Sea project team now. This team intends to completely disrupt the existing order, making every player fight for themselves, like in a browser game. If that's the case, then the next move from the team should be. Before Chen Yi could finish speaking, a new notification suddenly exploded in their ears. Listening to the notification beside their ears, Chen Yi said the words he hadn't finished earlier in a complex tone. Monsters are attacking. Activity update announcement. This event is a global-scale event, specially launched for the version update. A brand new event. Event name, Extraterrestrial Invader. Bravely pick up the weapons in your hands, and kill the enemies before you. Defeating different monsters will yield different points. Based on the points obtained by players, a global ranking will be carried out. Opening Extraterrestrial Invader Event Global Leaderboard. Additionally, a points store is introduced, where players can use the points they've earned to purchase various props or skill fragments, as well as exchange for points. The Snow Sea project team, wishing you a pleasant game. One has to say, the Snow Sea project team rolls out events faster than domestic browser game activities. The 520 limited time event hasn't even ended, and the Extraterrestrial Invader event is already upon us. The next second, the ground shook and the mountains quaked. They even felt the floor underneath their feet swaying. Immediately following, Chen Yi suddenly saw a flat map appear on his personal panel. In the middle was a little yellow dot, which should be his location. Nearby were quite a few green dots, likely the locations of other players. Zooming in on the map and pulling back further, one could see a dense array of red dots. These red dots should all be monsters. But Chen Yi's complexion was somewhat off. The event had already happened, and it was definitely unavoidable now. However, his strongest reliance right now was the sniper rifle in his hands. When used to kill bosses, it was absolutely a godsend. No matter how high the boss's health was, every shot would inevitably deal true damage amounting to 3% of the opponent's maximum health value. It could certainly be called a divine weapon. But when it came to fighting smaller monsters, it was somewhat embarrassing. Even the weakest monsters would need about 30 or so shots to be taken down. And those densely packed red dots seemed to all be smaller monsters. At that moment, these monsters were gathered outside Yanshanj, advancing towards the city, and by the looks of it, they would soon make contact. After pondering for a brief moment, Chen Yi removed the isolation suit from his body and walked briskly towards the first floor. Let's go. No matter the situation, it was best to make it to the edge of the city first. While one could naturally gain a measure of safety in the city center, one could also say that there was virtually no harvest at all. Risk and profit are always proportional. If you find that your risk and profit are not proportional, then that means, you've been tricked. After leaving Zhongdeng Square, they found that the law enforcement officers who should have been waiting for them outside the building had disappeared, probably off maintaining order somewhere. But there was no time to worry about the 3,000 points reward now, they would claim it later. At that moment, the streets had already devolved into total chaos. If the version updates of the past 4 or 5 months had left some people feeling hopeful, believing that things weren't that serious, then the 2 announcements just now had thoroughly convinced everyone of the severity of the situation. This was an apocalypse. Chen Yi frowned as he scanned the noisy crowd, mounted the motorbike, and after glancing at the fuel gauge, asked, "How much progress has your claw knife charge reached?" 389. "We might need it in a bit." MHM. With an air of anticipation, the tuberculosis rabbit stuffed the claw knife into its embrace and climbed onto the back seat of the motorbike. I wonder how powerful a claw knife with only a 389 charge progress can be. As the words fell, boom! The roaring sound of the throttle suddenly erupted, driving down the street towards the outskirts of the city. Ah! The panic-stricken scream of the tuberculosis rabbit accompanied the constantly flickering scenes in front of them, never ceasing. Yi's riding skills were actually very good. He used to be a professional stunt motorcyclist. But generally, during travel, it was Yi who would sit at the back, with him driving. Why? Because Yi was utterly fearless, and when he drove, his heart was exceptionally calm. He would twist the throttle to the limit and weave through traffic as if threading a needle. The speed was fast. But for the tuberculosis rabbit sitting in the back, it felt like its heart rate had also risen. Upon reaching the outskirts of the city, they could see a large portion of people, families in tow, rushing towards the city center. Clearly, everyone understood that the suburbs of Yancheng would soon face the onslaught of countless monsters. Staying in the suburbs at this time was no different from waiting for death. The streets were basically completely blocked. Chen Yi took a deep breath and lifted the front of the bike, driving over the rooftops of the jammed cars. These cars had already brought the streets to a standstill, immovable. In a way, the tops of these cars, linked together, were just like a slightly bumpier smooth road. Only a small fraction did as they did. Going against the flow of people. Carrying various weapons and using various means, they rushed to the outside of the city, ready to face the upcoming battle. Chapter 22. Extraterrestrial Invader Global Rankings. It was getting closer and closer. On Chen Yi's personal panel's flat map, there wasn't much distance left to those dense red dots. This was a monster tide. To put it accurately, it was a monster siege. The next second. Screech. The grating sound of brakes filled the air as Chen Yi brought his motorcycle to a halt in an open area, looking towards the nearly deserted streets with a solemn expression. At this moment, there was almost no one on the street in front of him. The streets were completely blocked by vehicles, making them impassable. Apart from that, there was a strong smell of fish. It was like the scent of the sea breeze in the evening in a coastal city. Yet Yancheng was a bona fide inland city, smelling the sea breeze here wasn't exactly normal. Chen Yi didn't stay put for too long, quickly making his way up to the high floors of a nearby office building. At the height of 39 floors, he could almost completely overlook the entire suburb. Standing at the edge of the rooftop, Chen Yi gazed at the edge of the city with a complex expression, observing the throngs of monsters slowly advancing towards the city like a tidal wave. There were too many, too dense. He couldn't even make out what these monsters looked like. No way. The tuberculosis rabbit looked dumbfounded at the monster tide not far away, then glanced down at the claw knife in its hand. That is, although I don't know how powerful my claw knife with a charge progress of over 300 is. Even if it's powerful, it's probably not going to take out this monster tide in one strike, right? There aren't many people here, and with just the few thousand of us, thinking of holding off so many monsters seems a bit like a pipe dream, doesn't it? They also came to understand the game's concept at this moment. The project team probably wanted all the players in the city to unite against these monsters, but it was clear that everyone had been in peace for long enough, and couldn't adapt quickly to taking up arms and going to battle. If they wanted to safely withstand this wave of beasts, all the players in the city needed to come together and resist. Hey! Chen Yi took a deep breath, looking a bit ill, before he took out a sniper rifle from his bosom, lay down on the rooftop floor, and observed the monster tide through the sniper scope. He couldn't think too much about it. First, he needed to look for any boss-level monsters. Just then, suddenly, a rumbling sound erupted. A long line of armored vehicles, tanks, and cloak trucks came pouring out towards the outskirts of the city. Then, before everyone could react, large numbers of soldiers jumped down from the vehicles and began constructing the first line of defenses, a process fluid and disciplined. At a glance, there were nearly 10,000 people. Has the military arrived? A trace of surprise flashed in the tuberculosis rabbit's eyes, followed by a relieved sigh. This feels much safer. Otherwise, just relying on us volunteers to stop this tide would be a real pipe dream. Only. The tuberculosis rabbit looked puzzled at the variety of weapons in the soldiers' hands. There are knives, bows and arrows, guns, and even mortars. These must be props, right? Does the military have so many props? I don't remember the law enforcement bureau in the city intending to collect points this month, do I? No, they haven't. Chen Yi's eyes narrowed slightly, and after a pause, he chuckled meaningfully, but that doesn't mean that the people in the military haven't been collecting points. I understand now. From the beginning, the military, or rather the state, had already realized the importance of points. They had already dispatched a large number of people to secretly collect points and skill fragments. But in order not to give some restless people any other ideas, they ordered the Law Enforcement Bureau not to collect points, so even those who felt that points might be very useful later on and wanted to collect them. Upon seeing that even the Law Enforcement Bureau's people showed little interest in points, they would abandon the thought. They trust the nation's actions more than their own judgment. Is that so? The tuberculosis rabbit nodded in sudden realization. Well, so that's how it is. The next second. Extraterrestrial Invader Yanchinch Rankings. Extraterrestrial Invader Global Rankings. 2 golden and enormous leaderboards appeared in the sky above Yanchinch, clear for everyone to see. At this moment, the top 100 names on the global leaderboard were already filled. The first place already had 38 points. Meanwhile, the Yanchinch ranking had not a single person listed, as no monsters had yet made formal contact. At that moment, Chen Yi, lying prone on the rooftop, suddenly noticed that many of the military personnel setting up the first line of defense kept looking back at him. Had he been discovered so quickly from his concealed position? Chen Yi quickly realized and, somewhat speechlessly, looked up at the huge title above his head. With this thing following him, it indeed seemed quite hard to stay hidden. He was like a firefly in the dark. And at this moment, the monsters were about to make contact with the military forces constructing the defensive fortifications ahead. They were now getting a clear view of what the monsters looked like. About half human height, they resembled enlarged bugs. Writhing bodies, sharp claw knives, and little heads with 7 or 8 eyes. The monsters, all of the same kind, surged towards Yanchinch. Chen Yi didn't hesitate any longer and turned to look at a prop in his backpack. Prop name, C-Grade Universal Skill Fragments X3. Prop level, C-Grade. Prop effect, can replace any C-Grade skill fragment and be used for synthesis. Prop introduction, like a 4-block piece in Tetris, it fits anywhere and can be used in the synthesis of all C-Grade skills. This was a prop he had acquired last time. He could synthesize a C-Grade skill fragment, but he had not used it, wanting to maximize its benefit. But now, obviously, he didn't have the luxury of choice. Immediately, the next second. Skill name, Violators, annihilate 9 clans. Skill level, C-Grade. Skill type, active skill. Skill effect, when you use firearms to kill a person, if the target is a player, the player's next 3 generations will die along with them. If the target is a monster, then the next 999 generations of that monster will die as well. Skill limitation, using it once incurs a cooldown period of 48 hours. Skill introduction, one day, a tyrant suddenly found the order to annihilate 9 clans too troublesome, so he developed this skill. He had not exchanged for this skill last time. On one hand, he wanted to maximize the benefit of the universal skill fragment, on the other hand, he felt this skill wasn't all that useful. Chapter 23. Fire 1 shot, and 9 generations of your family will be executed. A shot goes off, and your whole 9 clans are annihilated. It sounds good. But, it's not of much use to him. It wasn't until he saw that all the monsters were squirming worms that a somewhat crazy and gambler's-like idea began to surge in his heart. Chen Yi took a deep breath, forcibly suppressed his emotions, learned the skill, then tightly gripped the sniper rifle in his hand, stood up at the edge of the roof, and looked down at those monsters. Since they are all insect race monsters, there must be an origin, right? So that's what you mean, Yi. At this moment, the tuberculosis rabbit also realized it, a glint of ecstasy flickering in its eyes. Doesn't that mean, as long as we find the origin of this insectide, we can kill off all these insects with one shot? Just. Yi, are you sure that this insectide really has an origin? Not sure. Chen Yi transformed the sniper rifle into a Christmas cane and held it in his hand as he stood at the edge of the rooftop and shook his head, but if everything is going according to the game, there should be an origin. This origin will likely appear as the biggest boss. At that moment, an earth-shattering roar could already be heard coming from ahead. Only then did Chen Yi realize that the crossbows in the soldiers' hands were not props but modern industrialized weapons. That's right, firearms were unusable, but that didn't mean mechanical weapons like crossbows couldn't be used. Almost every soldier had one. The dense steel crossbow arrows, like a sky filled with flying feathers, suppressed the first wave of monsters. Those with hateful expressions, silently fell to the ground riddled with arrows. Besides that, there were about a dozen military men standing in the middle of the defense line, sprinkling something with their hands continuously, and with each wave, a burst of colorful light would sprinkle onto the soldiers in combat. Obviously, they were applying buffs and the like. There was even a middle-aged man in a military uniform who blew a horn, and the crossbow arrows stuck in the monsters' bodies actually returned the same way they came. Perfect retrieval of crossbow arrows during battle. Then there were nearly 1,000 military personnel holding various melee weapons, standing by coldly, ready to take over at any moment. Chen Yi was somewhat shaken by this. He had assumed that the military people were all sticklers, maybe not quite able to adapt, to a world that had suddenly been saddled with something as absurd and outrageous as a game. Looking at it now, the military had not only adapted quickly but had adapted very well. Through various props and skills, they had already developed a set of tactics that, while still a bit immature, would definitely evolve more and more as time went on. Bang! Chen Yi also took a shot out of curiosity. A bit of blood appeared on the head of a monster in the midst of the insectide, obviously without serious harm, not even bothering to glance in Chen Yi's direction. Completely useless. His sniper rifle, in this situation, was utterly useless. But he did notice one interesting point. There were no damage numbers popping up over the monster's head, and he wondered if it was only when attacking a boss that blood-red numbers representing damage would float up. But, there were just too many in the insectide. The crossbow arrows alone were not enough to stop these densely packed insects. It soon came to close combat, these fearlessly fierce monsters wildly charged toward the military ranks. Casualties occurred quickly. Without any hesitation, the nearly 1,000 people wielding melee weapons who had been on standby rushed to meet the monsters, and colorful lights sprinkled on these people, while those with crossbows quickly retreated, continuing to look for the right opportunity in the rear. 3 minutes later, those with melee weapons also quickly retreated, providing enough shooting space for their comrades in the rear with crossbows, as a volley of arrows continued to shoot straight through. It's a pity they weren't bows and arrows. In terms of area attack, the penetrating power of crossbow arrows was still not as effective as the splatter damage bows and arrows could provide. The players who had volunteered to come and defend were now each charging toward the monsters they had found alone. Urban combat was the most brutal. The players used all kinds of means to bury those monsters that had rushed into the streets right where they were. They were going to let these monsters know that this steel jungle was a forbidden area for all monsters. Casualties kept occurring. Perhaps the existence of version updates, props, and skill fragments made everyone subconsciously think this was just a game, but when the former comrades appeared before their own eyes, only then did everyone realize that this was not a game but a war. It was a war where failure would mean the annihilation of their kind. Did you find it, Yi? At this point, the war had fully escalated. The military personnel were retreating step by step, and they didn't even have time to collect the bodies anymore, with no reinforcements left. You should know that the insectide was not only attacking Yancheng from this direction but was coming from all sides, and the battles in other directions were equally intense, leaving no chance to send more help. The Law Enforcement Bureau was already in the city center, loudly urging capable men over loudspeakers to go to the front lines for support. It was quite obvious. The only way to save Yancheng now was for all the players in the city to unite and fight against those monsters. With the mobilization, indeed, many men, looking fearful but roaring fiercely, grabbed all sorts of weapons and headed from the city center to the edges to join the battle. They were afraid to come, but many were aware that if Yancheng couldn't be held, everyone would die. They fled back to the city center to protect their families. They picked up weapons and went to the front lines for the same reason. To protect their families. No. Chen Yi stood at the edge of a rooftop, his expression slightly grim, his eyes unwavering as he continually searched within the insect tide but found no monster that stood out from the rest. Could his conjecture have been wrong? There was no insect race queen or anything like that among these monsters. If he could just find the insect race queen, he could activate the skill he had just acquired and instantly deal with all of these insect race monsters. However, just as Chen Yi was preparing to climb to a taller building not far away to find a better vantage point, his eyes suddenly lit up as he stared at a monster in the beast tide nearby, a creature as tall as 3 men, emitting a blissful growl. This monster was much larger than the other insect race monsters and had a bloated off-white rear. Standing motionless in the midst of the insect tide, yet monsters charging forward by its side would automatically move slightly to the side when passing by, indicating that this monster's status in the insect tide was certainly not low. Immediately after, without any hesitation, Chen Yi transformed the sniper rifle into a Christmas cane, ready to go down the building and find a way to that insect race origin. But it was just as he glanced at the insect race origin before leaving. A panel suddenly appeared before his eyes. Monster name, First Level Insect Race Matriarch. Monster ability, able to continuously produce worms and control the worms it generates. Monster introduction, can simultaneously control 10,000 worms, serving as the first-level insect race matriarch in the extraterrestrial invader event, acting under the orders of a second-level insect race matriarch. P.S. A second-level insect race matriarch can control 100 first-level insect race queens. The highest leader for this extraterrestrial invader event is a 9th-level insect race matriarch. Chen Yi, staring at this suddenly emerged panel, slowly widened his mouth as a somewhat insane idea popped into his head. His C-level skill Violators, annihilate 9 clans, could kill any monster when activated, and all of that monster's clan members down the line would be instantly killed. This meant that if he killed that first-level insect race matriarch, then the 10,000 worm monsters controlled by this insect race matriarch would all die instantly. But the first-level insect race matriarch was under the rule of the second-level insect race matriarch. Chen Yi stood still, his body slightly stiffening as he swallowed dryly, looking down at the Christmas cane in his hand. Did that mean if he killed that 9th-level insect race matriarch, all the monsters in this global event would instantly die? One shot, annihilate 9 clans? This was clearly one shot, annihilate an entire race. Chapter 24. My name is Tai Chui, but you can call me Hammer. Tuberculosis Rabbit also reacted. Swallowing nervously, his eyes gleamed with insane excitement as he abruptly turned to look at the monstrous tide, his voice trembling with agitation. Yi. Does that mean if we can find the ultimate origin of this wave of monsters, we could kill all the monsters in the global event with one shot? How much reward would that be? Wouldn't the planet have to be renamed Chen after this? Theoretically, that's correct. Chen Yi stared intently at the insect race origin in the midst of the insect tide, a creature twice as large as the others, but this insect race origin is just a level 1 insect race matriarch, controlling only 10,000 insect race members. The one controlling the global insect race is a level 9 insect race matriarch. Let alone a level 9 insect race matriarch, in such a dense insect tide, it's difficult to even find a level 2 matriarch. If we find it, can we kill it? Yes. His sniper rifle is capable of percentage-based real damage. No matter if it's a level 1 insect race matriarch or a level 9 insect race matriarch. Just get hit by 33 of his bullets, even if the Jade Emperor himself showed up, he'd show you a death. Even if a god showed up, as long as they dared to show their health bar, they'd have to suffer a few major blows. But if a level 9 insect race matriarch really appeared before him, would he dare to shoot? Definitely not. He could break the defense, but that didn't make him invincible. Facing such a boss-level entity, a single glare might be enough to finish him off. So he wasn't crazy enough to go looking for a level 9 insect race matriarch to see who was tougher. Especially when the world is so vast. Who knows where that level 9 insect race matriarch is hiding? Meanwhile, the leaderboard above Yancheng showed that the top ranker already had nearly 237 kill points. Killing one insect race monster earns 1 kill point. To kill so many in such a short time, it was a situation where one man held the pass against 10,000 others. While Chen Yi was pondering, boom! The roaring sound suddenly rose from far to near, resonating by their ears. Glancing over, they saw an unarmed helicopter slowly landing on their rooftop. A middle-aged man in military uniform jumped down from the CO pilot seat and stood in front of Chen Yi, saluting before speaking hoarsely. "My name is Li Guo. I am here on a special operation that requires your participation. Through satellite, we have spotted an extremely large insect race creature on the outskirts of Yanqing's insect tide, and we suspect this insect race origin might be the leader of the other creatures. If we kill it, those monsters might lose control and scatter in panic, allowing Yanqing to survive this disaster. We have taken note of your performance in the Cupid event, and you possess a weapon capable of inflicting percentage damage. We now invite you to join us in this decapitation operation." Of course. Seeing that Chen Yi wasn't speaking, the middle-aged man paused and continued, "If you don't wish to fight, you may lend us your prop temporarily. When we return successfully, we will return it to you and pay you a substantial reward." Chen Yi's brow furrowed slightly, and after a moment of silence, he pointed towards the origin in the insect tide that he had been watching. "Are you referring to that one?" "No, one that's even bigger." "Bigger? Then it's at least a level 2 insect race matriarch, right?" Licking his slightly dry lips, Chen Yi narrowed his eyes and began to calculate silently in his heart. A level 2 insect race matriarch can control 100 level 1 insect race matriarchs. A level 1 insect race matriarch can control 10,000 insect race monsters. That is to say, killing a level 2 insect race creature would be equivalent to killing 1 million insect race monsters. Dangerous, yes, it was a bit dangerous. But the benefits were truly significant. He took a deep breath and patted Tuberculosis Rabbit's shoulder. "I'll go alone on this operation, you should stay back, your abilities won't be of any use if you follow." "How can that be possible?" Tuberculosis Rabbit immediately became anxious, speaking hurriedly with a worried look on his face. "Yi, we're a team. How can you leave me behind? Without you, I'll feel really insecure. Listen to me." Chen Yi shook his head calmly and then leaned in to whisper in his ear, "Stay here and come to pick me up later, understand?" Tuberculosis Rabbit was stunned for a moment, subconsciously prepared to glance at the middle-aged man in uniform next to him, but quickly stopped himself. After a pause, he hoarsely said, "Understood. Don't worry, Yi, with me here, there won't be any problems. As long as you understand." Chen Yi patted Tuberculosis Rabbit's shoulder, said nothing more, and followed the middle-aged man to the helicopter. Firearms couldn't be used anymore. But vehicles like tanks and armed helicopters that had their firearms removed could still be used normally, they just lacked offensive capabilities now. At this moment, inside the helicopter cabin, besides him, there were 2 other people. One was a towering giant of a man. The other was a lowly who was less than 1.5 meters tall. Only, she wasn't dressed in typical lowly attire, wearing a short black crop top and hot pants on the lower half of her body. Her figure wasn't bad. She stood out quite markedly. Even Chen Yi subconsciously took a few more glances. "What are you looking at?" As if she sensed Chen Yi's gaze, the little lowly slowly opened her eyes and spoke with an icy, crisp voice, surprised to see a lowly not dressed in lowly clothes. What kind of perverted old man would like lowly clothes? Stereotype. And at that moment, hee. The towering man sitting inside the helicopter, whose muscles seemed almost ready to burst out, squeezed out a friendly yet awkward smile and stuttered loudly. My sister, cute, right? My name. Tai Chui, you can call me Hammer." Chen Yi furrowed his brows and remained silent, simply putting on his noise-cancelling headphones, noticing that the towering man's facial expression seemed a bit off, his head twitching uncontrollably when he spoke. At this time, the helicopter had already taken off. The loud noise echoed in everyone's ears. After hesitating for a moment, he still took out a cigarette from his pocket and offered it to the giant. A glint of light flashed in the giant's eyes. Just as he was about to accept the cigarette with both hands, he was abruptly stopped by the lowly beside him. "Don't take it. I don't like you smoking." Seeing this, Hammer obviously became anxious, blocking the lowly with a worried and stammering urgency. "You, what do you know? This is the highest form of courtesy between men, this brother, respects me, that's why he's offering me a cigarette. Quick, give it to me." Chen Yi, noticing this, turned his head to look out of the cabin with a somewhat complex expression, remaining silent. The towering man in front of him was likely suffering from pathological cerebral palsy, his intelligence probably stuck in childhood, with some motor coordination issues. Such people, before the game arrived, might not have been bullied terribly, but it was all too common to receive disdainful looks. It was only after the game arrived. Through some means, he must have acquired some rather powerful skills to be considered valuable enough to be brought along on this beheading operation. Chapter 25. A symphony of dense reward notification sounds echoed. You. The little loli was obviously a bit angry, but seeing her brother like this, she hesitated for a moment before handing the cigarette to Hammer. Here, don't make a habit of it. The doctor said you should try not to smoke. Okay. Hammer, excited, took the cigarette and carefully placed it into his jacket pocket before grinning at Chen Yi. Brother, thanks, man. Heh. Chen Yi also laughed, didn't speak, just took a lighter out of his pocket and stuffed it into the brawny man's jacket pocket. He had only casually handed out a cigarette, after all. He didn't know why, but this brawny man seemed to be excited about it. Maybe in the eyes of the man, being given a cigarette was a recognition of his manhood. Instead of treating him like a mentally challenged person with the intelligence of a several-year-old child. It's just. He looked down calmly at the endless insect tide below, this time he might be getting sold out. This beheading operation was essentially a suicide mission. Although that man didn't spell it out. But some things were obvious at a glance. Sitting in a helicopter, going to the center of the insect tide to kill the insect race origin sounded simple, but how were they going to get back? It was basically a one-way mission. However, if everything went smoothly, perhaps they wouldn't need to land the helicopter, they could use a sniper rifle to kill the origin right from the air. Provided that the origin didn't have any long-range attacks from a great distance. They flew for almost 10 minutes. They had finally seen the massive matriarch amidst the countless insect tide on the plains. It was as tall as 2 small buildings. At that moment, Chen Yi held the Christmas cane in his hand and looked down at this gigantic matriarch. Sure enough, a panel appeared before him. Monster name, Second-tier insect race queen. Monster ability, can continuously produce first-tier insect race queens and control the first-tier insect race queens it produces. Monster introduction, capable of controlling 100 first-tier insect race queens at the same time. The second-tier insect race queen in this extraterrestrial invader event, obeying the commands of the third-tier insect race queen. Just as he had anticipated. His sniper rifle, when transformed into the Christmas cane, had the ability to see through one layer of obstacles, which was essentially X-ray vision. But if it was a monster that didn't wear clothes, without any obstructions in the middle, then the panel would be directly visible. It was a kind of hidden effect. Fire! At that moment, Chen Yi's earpiece carried the loud command from the man in the CO pilot's seat. Clearly, the military's plan was simple and crude. First, fire directly to see what the effect would be. Chen Yi looked up at the middle-aged man in the CO pilot's seat, his eyelids drooping, not speaking, just slowly raising the sniper rifle, aiming at the matriarch in the middle of the insect tide below. Bang! The muffled sound of the gunshot rang out. 60,000. A huge number in blood red appeared above the insect race matriarch. His single shot could deal true damage equal to 3% of maximum health value, implying that the boss's life value was a whopping 2 million health. That's double the health value of Cupid. Thankfully, the sniper rifle in his hands was a prop, unlike a real sniper rifle. As long as the target was in the scope, not too distant, and not too small, it would hit. No need for professional sniping skills. Exactly. The middle-aged man in the CO pilot's seat saw this and yelled with some enthusiastic information, raising his fist firmly, it's definitely percentage damage. Don't stop, keep firing. Chen Yi lightly massaged his shoulder which had been jolted slightly sore by the shot, his expression calm as he scanned the man in the CO pilot's seat. Without a word, he took aim again with the sniper rifle at the monster below. He didn't want to kill people. But the red glow in that man's eyes made him think he might really have to kill a bunch of people this time. He considered himself a good person, but that didn't mean he would allow others to take his possessions. No matter who that other person was. Bang! The second shot rang out again. A terrifying red number indicating damage appeared once more above the head of the insect race origin. And at this moment, the insect race origin seemed to realize the attack was coming from above, and with its somewhat bloated head, it emitted a piercing shriek that made Chen Yi and the others, despite wearing noise-cancelling headphones, feel a ringing in their ears and a sense of discomfort in their bodies. But other than that, there was no other reaction. It didn't even attack the helicopter that was continuously circling above its head. Hey! Chen Yi had a hint of surprise in his eyes. This monster actually had no long-range attack capabilities. If that was the case, then he would not hold back. One shot, and yet another. This time, there was nothing to absorb the recoil. The recoil from more than 30 shots was completely borne by him, and now both of his shoulders were so sore and numb that he nearly couldn't feel them anymore. During those 30-plus shots, other than the origin emitting ear-piercing screams and having monsters of the insect race huddle around it, attempting to shield it from damage, it made no other retaliatory moves. This situation made Chen Yi feel a tinge of regret. If every insect race origin lacked long-range attack abilities, then if he could find a level 9 insect race origin, wouldn't he be able to easily kill even the level 9 insect race matriarch? Finally, after 30-plus shots, the life value of the insect race origin had dwindled to 5%. Just one more shot. Under the effect of the slaying blow, he would be able to kill the level 2 insect race origin with one shot, annihilating the 999 clans beneath it completely. Essentially, he would kill 1,000,000 insect race monsters with one shot. But just as he was about to activate the Violators, annihilate 9 clans. Skill. The man sitting in the CO pilot's seat suddenly shouted with slight excitement through the headset, "That's enough, no more shooting. Your task is now finished. You did well, there will be a reward for you when you get back." Then, staring straight at Hammer, he spoke word by word, "Do you remember what I told you before boarding the helicopter? It's your turn to act now. Just place that crystal bomb on top of that insect race origin's head below, and your task will be complete. Hurry!" Before the middle-aged man could finish his sentence, Chen Yi calmly fired the final shot. Bang! Next second, a flurry of reward notifications, like a symphony, crazily erupted around Chen Yi's ears. Global announcements also followed one after another. The middle-aged man speaking stopped in surprise and then, angry, pointed at Chen Yi and yelled, "Didn't I tell you to stop shooting? Are you fucking insane? Do you realize whose reward you've stolen? You're courting death." Chen Yi didn't speak, simply took out a cigarette from his pocket, lit it, and held the sniper rifle in one hand with the barrel pressed against the middle-aged man's forehead. After exhaling a puff of smoke, he spoke softly. "Quit your bullshit act of being a big shot. Even if the Heavenly King came down, he couldn't steal my kill." Chapter 26. Wait, does this make sense? You. The middle-aged man sitting in the helicopter CO pilot seat stared at Chen Yi with a hateful expression and growled word by word, "Someone as selfish and despicable as you should have been executed immediately. When you left Yanshanj, did you see those soldiers? They were charging to the front lines, risking their lives, just to protect you weak and useless citizens. If the reward for this boss were given to the military, it would mean so much more than in your hands, including that sniper rifle you're holding. A fixed percentage damage weapon should not be in your hands. Sure talk a lot." Chen Yi sighed lightly, tapping his finger on the trigger, tossing the cigarette that hadn't burned out yet onto the dense cluster of lights below, and whispered, "Your confidence comes from knowing that my gun deals percentage damage. Can't a single shot kill a person?" The next second, ZZT. Chen Yi's right arm forcefully thrust the sniper rifle straight into the man's eye socket, piercing right through. Under the effect of the passive skill calm and composed, his physical attributes had been maintained at a 2-time enhancement for a long time. Calling it Kylan arm was no exaggeration. Guns have more ways to kill than just bullets. Blood erupted violently, and with a slight flex of his arm, he flung the middle-aged man's corpse from the chopper right as he was ready to switch with the helicopter pilot. Suddenly, he realized the helicopter was losing control, spiraling downward. Chen Yi frowned, lifting the pilot's helmet with the gunpoint, only to discover that the pilot was actually a wooden figure, resembling a puppet of some sort, definitely not a living person. After the middle-aged man died, it started to lose control. This is bad. He glanced uncertainly towards the distance, pulling out a small mirror from his chest, and hurriedly said to the two people beside him, "Follow me, I'll take you with me." This was his original plan. This mission, it was hard to ensure a safe return. After all, the plan had seemed rudimentary and resigned to death from the very beginning. In case something went wrong, He would activate his own skill, dive into the mirror, then quickly head towards Tuberculosis Rabbit. And Tuberculosis Rabbit would also have a mirror, riding a motorcycle towards him. To ensure that they could leave the mirror world within 10 minutes. Otherwise, they would be overdue and trapped in the mirror world forever. No need. Iron Hammer, sitting beside him, chuckled dumbly a couple of times, grabbed the little Loli's legs, swung her around in the air, and then hurled her forcefully down towards the ground below the helicopter. "Brother, watch this!" The little Loli hadn't even had the chance to speak before she started spinning rapidly in the air and shot straight towards the ground. The moment Chen Yi took out the mirror, ready to activate his skill, he subconsciously froze upon seeing this scene. He looked up at Tai Chui in front of him, his expression somewhat baffled. "Didn't you say she was your sister? And you just threw her out like that? As if she was a hand grenade?" The next second, Iron Hammer suddenly extended his right hand, grabbing his arm, and just as Chen Yi was about to drive the sniper rifle into this man's skull, he suddenly saw a flash of white light in front of his eyes. When his vision returned, his feet were already on the ground. And the helicopter above was still slowly falling, crashing to the ground a few seconds later with an explosion and bursting into fierce flames. Chen Yi scanned the dense array of props on the ground around him, still not quite catching up. Only to see Tai Chui pulling out a Rubik's Cube from his chest and handing it to him. "Here, this is the crystal bomb that guy mentioned. You're my brother. How could I possibly steal your monster? He's too dumb." "That's not important, we'll talk about it later." Chen Yi put away the sniping rifle he was holding and looked at the two people in front of him with a frown, asking subconsciously, "Just now, what was that?" He really didn't understand what had just happened. It was a skill. The little Lolita crossed her arms in front of her chest, slightly raising her eyebrows with a hint of pride. "I have a skill that's a C-grade skill. It allows me to ignore distance, with no consumption, and instantly draw a bound player to my side." "And Tai Chui's skill, never mind, Tai Chui, you show him." "Hee, okay." Tai Chui chuckled, and a skill panel appeared above his head. Skill name, Malphite's Brain. Skill level, C-grade skill. Skill type, passive skill. Skill effect, when the brain is not thinking, the following effects can be obtained. Body defense effect, greatly enhanced. Limb strength effect, greatly enhanced. Additional effect, this skill is limited to 1000 pieces, 38 of which have already been acquired. When all 1000 pieces of the skill are acquired, a hidden effect will be activated. Brain share, when one of the players starts thinking, the IQ of the remaining 999 players will slightly decline, but their body defense and limb strength will increase. When 999 players start thinking, the remaining one player's IQ will sharply decline, but body defense and limb strength will receive an epic enhancement. Skill introduction, firm as a rock, charge. Chen Yi stared at the skill panel floating above Tai Chui's head, remaining silent and speechless. That's pretty good. This was his first time seeing a limited edition skill. And it was globally limited to 1000 pieces. Even though it's just a C-grade skill, it's already being limited. But the skill effect, it seems really suitable for Tai Chui, essentially a permanent enhancement of physical quality. Like a godly skill. It feels even stronger than his own calm and composed skill. No, his calm and composed is stronger. At least his godlike composure isn't gained through fear. And after all 1000 pieces of the skill are acquired, a hidden effect can be activated, which although has a big drawback, the payoff sounds quite good. He felt a bit of pain in his teeth, subconsciously took out a cigarette and put it in his mouth to cover his embarrassment, then gestured as he spoke. "So you mean, your just now process was, Tai Chui threw you to the ground, then just before you landed, you drew Tai Chui to your side. Having Tai Chui in mid-air to help you offset the impact force. And then you stood on Tai Chui's shoulders to land safely. Wait, does that even make sense? What is this?" The little Lolita, standing aside with her arms crossed, somewhat disdainful yet proud, spoke up, "That's nothing, wait till you see our combination move. Tai Chui, combine." "Got it." The next second, all they saw was Tai Chui grabbing the little Lolita's legs, swinging her around in the air a few times before tossing her straight up into the sky. Chapter 27. The brilliance of those 5 titles is really dazzling. Like daytime fireworks, they rocketed straight into the sky. Immediately afterward, just as the little Loli was about to fall in mid-air, the hammer was drawn back to her side. Then Tai Chui grabbed the little lowly's legs again and flung her even higher. The little lowly, thrown to greater heights, summoned the hammer back to her side once more. After several rounds of this, in the sky, these two had become tiny black dots that were nearly shoulder to shoulder, about to vanish from Chen Yi's line of sight. Gulp! Stunned in place, he swallowed hard as he gazed at the two dots that seemed about to fly out of the atmosphere. His face was vacant as he unconsciously lit the cigarette at the corner of his mouth. In the midst of the light blue wisps of smoke, he rubbed his neck, which was a bit sore from looking up for so long, and murmured. Not bad. This is a skill combination effect I never thought of. Looking at their manner, it seemed they only needed a spacesuit and the two could head straight to the moon to settle down. Are they just going to escape from Blue Star? Isn't this just a sea-level skill? Was it necessary for its effect to be this exaggerated? And this speed? To be honest, he felt it was much faster than a helicopter. If nothing unexpected happened, these two should be able to survive for a long time. Even if they fell into the insect tide, they should be able to escape easily. He took a deep breath and looked down at his surroundings, rubbing his somewhat sore neck again. Snakes have snake paths, and rats have rat trails. This world is becoming crazier and crazier. At this moment, there were no longer any insect race monsters to be seen around him. All were lying motionlessly on the ground as corpses, which were beginning to fade and slowly disappear. The ground, however, was scattered with many shimmering dropped items. They were dropped by the second-level insect race matriarch. Other lesser monsters don't drop items upon death. As for the first-level insect race matriarch's death, it did drop items, but they were too scattered. He definitely wouldn't be able to pick them all up. Maybe he should just give them away. He looked thoughtfully at the scene before him, preparing to first use the prop that could be broadcast live. After all, the scene before his eyes was not common. It should be eye-catching enough. It could earn a big wave of points. As for his backpack, it was almost stuffed full. The backpack had only 100 slots, and 78 slots were already occupied at this time. One prop took up one slot. One type of skill fragment took up one slot. 100 slots seemed somewhat insufficient. But, before going live, Chen Yi, with a serious expression, pinched out his cigarette and prepared to start sorting through his gains. Firstly, there were the dense system notifications. There were just too many. After he killed the second-level insect race matriarch, the dense system notifications began to sound incessantly. It felt like this global event was more about getting players accustomed to or warming up for the June version update, because these insect race monsters didn't seem as strong as he had imagined. An ordinary person wielding a weapon could also kill an insect race monster. Even the insect race boss monsters didn't have very powerful attacks, they just had a bit more health. It was a bit like a welfare event. And these system notifications completely filled the notification page of Chen Yi's personal panel on the left side. Firstly, there was the global announcement that all players could see. Global announcement: Central Hua Region's Yanchinj became the first city to resolve the extraterrestrial invader crisis during this global event. All Yanchinj-affiliated players will receive a 50 points reward and 3 random skill fragments. Global announcement: in the Central Hua Region's Yanchinj, the player with the most kill points in the extraterrestrial invader event is Chen Yi, hereby awarded the title, Invincible Under the Heavens. Then there was the personal announcement that only he could see. Ding! You have killed 1 second-level insect race matriarch, 95 first-level insect race matriarchs, and 920,000 insect race monsters, earning a total of 970,000 points. Friendly reminder, the global event lasts for 3 days. Please spend your points in the extraterrestrial invader event shop before the event ends. Failure to do so will be treated as forfeiture. Ding! You've single-handedly killed 900,000 of your kin, earning the extremely rare title, Violators, Annihilate 9 clans. Ding! You have killed over 500,000 insect race monsters, earning the rare title, Nemesis of the Insect Race. Ding! You have become the first player to appear in the global announcement, earning the rare title, Peerless Under the Sky. Ding! You have successfully picked up a sea-level prop. The flood of system messages made Chen Yi's eyes hurt. But he didn't feel the slightest bit of annoyance. After all, these were all his rewards, the things that would determine what heights he could reach in the future world. How could it feel tedious? After briefly reviewing the rewards he had received this time, Chen Yi suddenly fell silent where he stood. Moments later, he lit a cigarette and put it in his mouth, his expression distant as he looked at the fatal strike title above his head glowing with blue light, and after a moment, he exhaled softly and whispered. You have companions now. You won't be alone anymore, let me count, you have a total of 4 companions. Yes. Among these dense rewards, he was directly awarded 4 more titles. They were Invincible under the heavens, Violators, annihilate 9 clans, Nemesis of the insect race, Peerless under the sky. 4 neat titles. He could even imagine how they looked floating above his head. These titles were tradable before they were permanently bound, meaning he could trade them to other players for points. But, the effects that came with these titles were very tempting. Trading them for points would be a waste. That being said, Chen Yi still couldn't help but slightly twitch the corners of his mouth. It felt a bit ridiculous to wander around in the real world with 5 titles over his head. At least, he could no longer work as a sniper. What kind of lucky outfit could conceal those 5 titles that glowed continuously in the dark? Pretty good. He could even imagine the rate at which people turned their heads on the street. Essentially 99%. The remaining 1% must be blind. Afterward, he took a deep breath and firmly resolved to bind all 4 new titles and wear them. Lucky he hadn't completed that mission for the Cupid title, otherwise, there would be one more lucky child of the God of Love title over his head. And at that moment, Tai Chui finally crashed down from the air. Brother. Just as Tai Chui got up from the ground and tried to say something, he looked up at the nearly 2-meter stack of titles above Chen Yi's head and was stunned where he stood. So dazzling. The light from those 5 titles was really dazzling. Chapter 28. Does light pollution really need to be this excessive? Gulp. Tai Chui looked up admiringly and longingly at the row of titles above Chen Yi's head. Brother, you're really amazing. In the midst of his words, the man's neck spasmed uncontrollably a few times. Chen Yi also let out a sigh but didn't speak, instead starting to ponder. The effects of these 4 titles were all quite good. They were: title name, Invincible under the heavens. Title level, yellow. Title effect, you can activate a supreme yellow semi-transparent staircase that leads to your desired destination, with a maximum climbing height of 300 meters and maximum length of 1000 meters. After use, it enters a 24-hour cooldown period. Obtaining method, achieve first place on the kill score leaderboard in the extraterrestrial invader event for a certain city. Title name, Violators, annihilate 9 clans. Title level, red. Title effect, when you hold a cane-like prop, a 2-meter diameter red patterned light circle will appear at your feet, and you can rise from within the circle on a scarlet frozen throne on the spot, entering a 30-minute cooldown after use. Activating the chair grants special effects. Special effects, when the frozen throne is activated, you can summon a fully obedient heavy armored soldier at the cost of 10 points, with no limit on summon quantity. Obtaining method, kill 900,000 or more monsters of the same kind in one go. Title name, Nemesis of the insect race. Title level, blue. Title effect, no bug dares to come near you, as you will have an aura that instills extreme fear in all insects around you. Obtaining method, kill a total of more than 500,000 insect race monsters. Title name, Peerless under the sky. Title level, yellow. Title effect, after activation, your pupils will flash with lightning for 10 seconds, with no cooldown time. Obtaining method, become the first player to appear in a global announcement. Yes. These were the effects of his 4 titles. Chen Yi, his face expressionless, leaned on the slightly out-of-character Christmas cane in his hand, and a red-patterned light circle appeared around his feet, looking particularly eye-catching. He tentatively activated the title effect of Peerless under the sky. Instantly, his deep pupils flashed rapidly with streaks of lightning like a serpent. He picked up a mirror and placed it in Tai Chui's arms. Then he saw his current state in the mirror. After sighing lightly, he murmured in a low voice. Does the light pollution really need to be cranked up this high? His current state? He was even a bit embarrassed to look at himself. He always felt that the development team of this game seemed to have some sort of wicked sense of humor, always liking to add some flashy stuff. However, that red title's special effect was kind of interesting and could be useful in certain situations, maybe. He shook his head helplessly, turned to look at the little lowly standing next to Tai Chui, and suddenly held his breath. This little lowly was wearing only a tight crop top and a pair of denim shorts. And his cane's effect included seeing through obstacles. After being silent for a while, he put the cane back into his backpack without any change in expression, and then continued to look at the two people in front of him. There should be quite a few good items around. You guys go pick them up. They're a bit far, so I'll pass. Then, without continuing the conversation, he turned and walked in the direction of Yancheng, pulling out the live streaming prop from his bosom as he went. If I don't use it soon, this prop is going to disappear. Let's take it out first and circle back to the tickets afterward. Prop name, live stream ticket. Prop level, grade C. Prop effect, can initiate a live stream that can accommodate up to 100,000 players. When the user starts the live stream, 100,000 players globally will receive random notifications about whether they can enter the live stream room. If players choose to enter, they need to pay 6 points. Prop restrictions, the live stream can last up to 3 hours at most. The user can only keep half of all the points they earn, and the prop is single use only. If it's not used within 24 hours, it will automatically disappear. Skill introduction, come and start a live stream that belongs to you. Originally, he was thinking about what kind of content to broadcast to attract more people into his live stream room to earn as many points as possible. Now it seems that it might not be so complicated. After all, he's somewhat famous now. The first player to appear on the global announcement, and the one who killed the most during the extraterrestrial invader event in Yancheng. Once he revealed his name, who wouldn't want to spend 6 points to come and take a look at him? Who wouldn't want to come in and ask how he did it? Without any hesitation, he immediately set the live stream title to Chen Yi, rank 1 player globally, answering your questions live. The moment the live stream room opened, whoosh whoosh whoosh, the number of viewers began to skyrocket. It didn't stop until it hit 78,000. Only 22,000 people didn't enter his live stream room. Those people might either think that 6 points is too expensive, unwilling to spend it, or they just didn't have 6 points to spare at all. But regardless of the reason, he was already quite satisfied with this number. Questions started rolling across the screen like crazy. He casually picked a few that he knew the answers to and replied. Just like that, half an hour went by, and when he looked up again, he saw Tuberculosis Rabbit leaning on a motorcycle, smoking a cigarette. That's it for today's live stream. See you when fate allows it. He casually turned off the live stream room, and at the same time, 216,000 points were successfully credited to his account. He finally understood why traffic is money. If it wasn't for the fact that he, Chen Yi, had just been featured on the global announcement, he wasn't sure if he could have attracted so many viewers. Only then did he look up at Tuberculosis Rabbit leaning on the motorcycle in front of him and spoke with some annoyance. Weren't you coming to pick me up? You were just waiting here. Hee hee. Tuberculosis Rabbit, eyes filled with excitement, grinned. I was going to go, but seeing Brother Yi shoot up to the global announcement with just 1 shot, I knew you weren't in danger. So I just waited here for you. To give you the feeling of a triumphant return. Chen Yi glanced at Tuberculosis Rabbit and shook his head. Enough with the nonsense, let's head back to the city. Roger that. A few minutes later, they rode the motorcycle back to Yancheng. At this time, the military on the outskirts of Yancheng had already started cleaning up the battlefield. The bodies of the monsters didn't need to be dealt with, as they would turn into white light and vanish on their own after a few minutes. However, the human corpses did need to be cleared. And with nearly 100 level 1 matriarchs of the insect race dead, a lot of good stuff had dropped. It looked like the military had already sealed off the exits of Yancheng and began sending people to collect these spoils of war. And with the arrival of Chen Yi and his companion, all eyes couldn't help but focus on Chen Yi. It couldn't be helped. Those 5 titles were simply too eye-catching, it was impossible to pretend not to see them. Meanwhile, inside the military headquarters, 2 elders were staring solemnly at a scene being transmitted by satellite. Chapter 29. When it comes to background checks, you still have to count on us. In the satellite imagery, they could clearly see the helicopter, hovering above the monster, continuously attacking the insect race matriarch. Accompanied by the final blow, the insect race matriarch collapsed with a thunderous crash. Immediately afterward, nearly 100 red beams burst forth from the corpse of this insect race matriarch, shooting in all directions at almost impossible speeds. They struck directly into the bodies of nearly 100 first-level insect race matriarchs. as these first-level insect race matriarchs were hit by the red beams. They had virtually no ability to resist and died on the spot. But it wasn't over. Falling like dominoes. The entire scene looked incredibly shocking. Just a moment ago, the millions of monsters surrounding Yancheng had all died in unison within 3 seconds. This was a scene that even movie special effects would struggle to create, yet it was happening in reality. Hey! One of the two elders standing in front of the table, a short old man with thinning hair and wearing a gown, murmured in shock, "Such terrifying power! Even if our firearms had not been banned. With our capabilities, we would also struggle to clear a million monsters within 3 seconds. This can already be called a power belonging to the gods." The other elder in formal attire and an icy expression pointed to the next part of the scene in the imagery. "This young man killed a soldier. He should be sent to a military tribunal. In special times, he should be executed by firing squad directly." "No." The short elder tightened the gown around him, signaling his subordinates to turn down the air conditioning before he spoke hoarsely. "Without firearms, our military isn't much stronger than the civilians. Most importantly, he has now become a hero of Yancheng. Killing a hero during war is a major taboo in military strategy." The elder in formal wear nodded first, then spoke. "But we can take away all his props and skills. These are different from titles. Titles cannot be lost once bonded, but props and skills have a high chance of dropping upon killing." "Then what?" The short elder lifted his eyelids to look at the man before him. "Are we to do this every time citizens have such an opportunity? Are we to kill everyone and take what they have? How are we any different from bandits then? I will report this matter, it's not for us to decide. However, inform the other cities first. Yancheng has made a significant discovery. If you kill the origin of the insect tide, the other monsters will die as well." The elder in formal attire stayed calm, not speaking anymore, just looking at the plane that was slowly falling from the sky in the image, his eyes gradually narrowing without a word. A national weapon can only be called a weapon when it is in one's own hands. Meanwhile, as Chen Yi and the Tuberculosis Rabbit entered Yancheng, they were stopped by someone. "Hello." A young man in a suit appeared in front of Chen Yi with a respectful expression, accompanied by 18 women dressed in black stockings. "Allow me to introduce myself, we are from Yancheng Mutual Entertainment KTV. Our boss would very much like to invite you to join our power. As long as you join our power. These are just meeting gifts." Chen Yi cast a thoughtful glance at these people and then looked towards the heavily guarded military presence nearby, nodding. "You guys should be classified as an illegal organization, right? Let's not beat around the bush." The young man smiled wryly, shaking his head. "It's only the second global update, and it's already like this. If it weren't for you, sir, who knows how many people in Yancheng would have died this time. Joining a power at least makes things more convenient for future actions. Besides, since skill fragments and points have appeared, who knows if a guild system might show up in the future. We're just getting a head start." "I understand." Chen Yi nodded, randomly sweeping his gaze around. "Go back and tell your boss, no need, I appreciate his kindness." "Sorry." The young man took a few steps back, tightened his tie, and looked at Chen Yi with a calm expression. "Our boss has a message for you, and you don't have the right to refuse. Join or die, you must choose one. Don't think the military can protect you. In the current situation, the death of a person is no different from that of a rat." Chen Yi looked at the man in front of him with a slightly odd expression, instinctively raising his head to look at the 5 titles above his head, noting that they were still there and shining brightly. He then looked at the young man in front of him with a bit of a toothache. "Do these 5 titles on my head not intimidate you at all? See them. Look, that's the Violators, Annihilate 9 Clans title. Doesn't that title look imposing and bloody? At least give me the respect I deserve, and can you not threaten me to my face? It makes me feel like only I can see these titles on my head. They're still somewhat effective in deterring ordinary people." As the young man retreated, he spoke softly with a calm expression. "We've investigated, you have a sniper gun that can deal a set percentage of damage. No matter the boss, as long as a certain number of shots are fired, any boss can be killed. And the rules for this extraterrestrial invader event happen to be that if you kill the insect race origin, those insect race monsters will also die. Your prop made you stand out in this event. But, good for killing bosses, not so much for killing people, right? And to kill you, we only need 1 shot, we might not even need to fire. Do you know about maze rule? Do you know how easy it is to kill someone using maze rule? You have 1 day to think it over. Ask around, you should be able to find out which building Mutual Entertainment KTV is in, don't delay beyond the time limit. You wouldn't want anything to happen to your family, would you? Having said that, the young man swiftly left with the dozen or so women behind him. Chen Yi stood in silence, somewhat at a loss for words, pulling a cigarette from his chest and lighting it as he turned to look at Tuberculosis Rabbit. Do I look that easy to bully? I've got 5 titles on my head, and yet I'm being threatened so blatantly to my face. Indeed. Tuberculosis Rabbit nodded in strong agreement. He actually threatened us with family, doesn't he know we're classic orphans? Where do we even have families? This background check is obviously non-professional. Indeed. Chen Yi let out a light sigh before nodding in agreement. In terms of background checks, they should learn from us. Let that Mutual Entertainment KTV boss understand the meaning of my title. That smug little brat is so annoying, he's given me a full-blown case of annoyance. Chapter 30. Player Lu Yishao has activated the prop arena. This scene was witnessed by quite a few people. After all, given the current status of Chen Yi, one could say he was the focal point of the crowd, and no one could resist taking a few extra glances at the man with 5 titles above his head. Men, women, young, and old alike were interested. Apart from Chen Yi, there were also many others in the crowd with titles above their heads. However, they were all white. Lucky child of the god of love. You could earn this title by confessing your true feelings to a member of the opposite sex during the limited time event on May 20th. As to how sincerity was judged, the game had its own standards, similar to how it could determine if a player's 1,000 words spoken to others met the requirements of the daily active expert mission. And as of today, it just happened to be May 20th. There were 11 days left until June 1st, and the month had 31 days. At this time, the sky was gradually darkening. People around started to shift their gaze away from Chen Yi and the others, beginning to busily tend to their own affairs. Meanwhile, not far away, loud collision sounds were constantly resounding through the city. Work had begun to clear the vehicles accumulated in the middle of the streets, and behind that, a small number of construction teams were seen slowly following. It seemed preparations were being made to build some sturdy defense structures outside the city walls. Fortunately, the last patch update had only restricted human firearms, but did not completely ban all of the existing technological achievements of humanity. Nobody knew whether a monster siege like this would happen again. The entire city started to get busy. Authorities were shouting through loudspeakers on the streets, calling for construction workers to join them. In the chaos just now, the city's information system seemed close to collapsing, if not completely. To look for someone in such circumstances was truly no small feat. Besides that, it seemed like there was a lot more being said, but they were too far to hear clearly. Tuberculosis Rabbit took out a cigarette from his embrace and threw it into his mouth, hands in his pockets as he glanced around, tongue clicking ruefully. Maybe we should stock up on more cigarettes, who knows if the factories can continue running smoothly. The price of cigarettes has been going up recently. The amount we have stashed might not be enough. Chen Yi nodded slightly, then shrugged and took out his phone, opening the navigation app to start searching for the route to Mutual Entertainment KTV in Yancheng. That kid's words were strange too. He even told me to go and ask around. Doesn't he know there's something called navigation? Let's go. It's best to deal with these people early. The world is becoming increasingly dangerous, and if any of them has some special prop or skill and ambushes us out of the blue, that wouldn't be good. That's true. Tuberculosis Rabbit's eyes narrowed as he drew the claw knife from his embrace, holding it in a reverse grip, and said in a cold tone, "What I hate most is people disturbing my sleep. Those sneaky people will definitely attack me while I'm asleep. By the way." Chen Yi suddenly furrowed his brows and turned to Tuberculosis Rabbit. "What kinds of dreams do you have? Why were you talking to someone all night in your dreams? And so clearly at that? I've never seen anyone move their mouth during a wet dream, and if they do, it's certainly not like that. I don't know about that." Tuberculosis Rabbit appeared somewhat confused, scratching the back of his head with a clear glint of foolishness in his eyes. "Every time I wake up, I've forgotten it completely. The only impression left is it's sort of like giving a speech or something." "Forget it." Chen Yi shook his head and did not speak further. Instead, he focused on the navigation route and straddled a motorcycle. "Let's go, we've got some trouble to deal with tonight. Oh. Tuberculosis Rabbit first nodded, then patted the motorcycle beneath him with some regret. Yi, do you still remember our dream to buy the most expensive motorcycle? Given the current global situation, it looks like that dream of ours will be hard to realize. Those manufacturers will probably be out of business for a long time. That's nothing to worry about. Chen Yi, putting on a helmet nearby, said casually, judging by the patience of this game project's team, it wouldn't be surprising if they introduced vehicles later on. I even suspect we'll see outrageous vehicles like the Kowloon Coffin, the Heavenly Throne. Hold tight. You make sense, but I feel that with the speed you ride it, wearing a helmet is pretty much meaningless. It's for sound insulation, you talk too much. Oh. We're here. In an office building opposite to the Mutual Entertainment KTV in Yanshan, Chen Yi and his companion stood on the 6th floor looking out at the short building. That 6-story building was the Mutual Entertainment KTV. Chen Yi hid behind a pillar, peering out at Tuberculosis Rabbit who stood by with binoculars. How is it, any movement inside that KTV? Yes. He didn't dare stick his head out to check. The reason was simple. He was too conspicuous. The 5 huge, glowing titles above his head nearly wiped out any possibility of reconnaissance, stealth, or assassination. Can you imagine, while you're sitting in the KTV office leisurely sipping tea with your legs crossed, suddenly through the glass you spot 5 giant, shiny titles inside a room of the office building across the street? Even an idiot would know someone had arrived. They should be in. Tuberculosis Rabbit reported hurriedly with a mix of nervousness and excitement. Floors 1 to 5 show no signs of life, the lights are off, but the 6th floor is brightly lit, though the curtains are drawn so I can't see clearly. But I can see many people moving on the 6th floor through the curtains. Understood. Chen Yi breathed a sigh of relief and promptly took out a mirror from his bosom, preparing to enter the KTV through the mirror and deal with these people without alerting anyone. After all, the city was in chaos at the moment. But if he handled some matters too openly, it was still easy to be identified as a destabilizing element and be dealt with. Especially the fact that only he had returned from the mission involving the helicopter, and not the middle-aged man. The military hadn't inquired about this incident, which gave him a slight sense of unease. It defied logic, and when something defies logic, it indicates a deeper logic within. Just as he was about to act. Boom! A luminescent circle like an eggshell suddenly rose around the office building, enveloping both the building and the Mutual Entertainment KTV. Following this, a zone announcement suddenly blared in Chen Yi's ears. Player Lu Yishao has activated the prop arena. There are 2 factions within the arena. Chen Yi and Tuberculosis Rabbit as one faction, and all others as the remaining faction. The arena will only open when all members of one faction have been wiped out. Arena effect: all skills and props owned by players within the arena cannot be used.